Cosmic Kick Velocity by Rocket Soriano. Chapter 2. Chase Post Haste. Remind me never to fight naked, said Rowan, settling into her pilot's seat at the front of the bridge. I saw parts of Brune and sea I haven't even seen on myself. Mel sat in the co-pilot chair to Rowan's left, checking her gauges. You know, I think Brune did pretty well, considering we all saw her periwinkle? I don't know. Zephyr is just kind of scary. Her periwinkle is kind of scary, said Rowan, adjusting her console's calibration settings. Mine might be too though, she conceded with a shrug. Never seen it. A sigh came from behind. It was the captain. If you two could temporarily postpone this intellectual discourse, I'd really like to know the results of the latest scan. Rowan glanced back in mild chagrin as she fastened her seatbelt. A puffy-eyed Captain Sora slouched in her rusty iron and leather chair. Despite her weary state, the captain looked sharp as always in her crisp navy blue uniform. The girls, on the other hand, sat in their wrinkled gray jumpsuits, with the perpetually cold Mel also sporting a knit cap and fingerless gloves. The bridge was a dark octagonal room about 30 feet in diameter. It was all faded grays and browns with dim, warm points of light from the many control panels along its surfaces. Thick, transparent panes of tempered silica angled back along the front 5 sides, opening Rowan and Mel's field of vision to the endless abyss of space. Behind them and up a few steps was the captain's command chair, and a few yards behind that was the reinforced door to the passageway beyond. On it now, Captain, said Mel. She stifled a yawn as she flipped the switch next to the round convex screen on her panel. And it looks like there's nothing to, Captain Sora was packing tobacco into her pipe when she heard Mel's voice drift off, making the captain glance up and raise an eyebrow. Several seconds of silence passed. Max? Said Mel. Could you take a look at this? The only other person on the bridge with them was the operations manager, Max, quietly working at her post off to the captain's right. The haze from her screen lit up her gentle golden brown face, currently muted in concentration. Max. Max lifted her head and blinked. Look at your scanner, said Mel. Captain Sora straightened up in her chair at the sudden edge in Mel's voice. She set her pipe down and swiveled her chair starboard as Max switched on her own scanner. The image blinked into view and scrolled a few times before stabilizing. Max leaned back. That's... What? Said the captain. Let me make sure our scanners are functioning correctly first. Tell me what you see now, then check later, said Sora. According to this, it looks like something's approaching. Max began clacking away on her keyboard. Fast. Approaching. What do you mean approaching? Like on a collision course. No, Max continued typing away. More like an intercept course. Sora blinked. A ship, then? Out here. It's too far away, said Mel. We can't be sure. I'm sure, said Max. Her voice sounded odd, low and tense in a way they'd never heard before. I mean, if this is right, if our equipment's working, but it probably is, this would be a weirdly specific malfunction. She took a moment to collect herself. This thing. This ship. It's not aiming for where we are, but where we're going to be, and it's not moving in a straight line. It's curving and decelerating. Now Rowan twisted around. What, like they're going to pull up alongside? Max took a deep breath and then nodded. She turned to look at her crewmates, the worry plainly visible in her eyes. Yeah. Captain Sora was deathly still as the information washed over her. Her silence had spread to the others as well when they noticed her expression. Then, as the crew watched, her face began to change. It went from shock to acceptance to something else they hadn't seen before, or at least couldn't remember seeing. Sora rose from her chair. Okay. She began to slowly pace around it. Okay, then. All the way out here. So they're pirates, then. That was always a possibility. Mel's pulse began to quicken. Already? Are we even? She shook her head. Wait, we can't really be sure yet, can we? There's something else, Captain, said Max. Sora paused in her concentrated pacing and looked over. The way it's moving. Max glanced at the screen and back to the captain. The speed at which it's traveling, the curve, the way it's slowing down. She took a deep breath. All of that. It's way beyond anything our ship could ever do. Rowan and Mel were both staring at her open-mouthed. Whatever they're flying, said Max, I have no idea how it works, their technology. They're way beyond us. This, she waved her hand at her monitor, is sci-fi stuff. Okay. Captain Sora began to pace again. That was always a possibility too. In fact, we expected it. It's been 150 years, longer for them. They were bound to come up with something. Rowan and Mel watched her with interest. A visible change was happening to their weary captain. It was as if some long-dormant part of her was waking up. All right, said the captain. A little sooner than we expected, but that's okay. She made another loop around her chair. How much time do we have? They should be here. Max seemed to freeze a moment, then shook her head. Let me just check one more time. She turned back to her keyboard and typed away, her fingers a blur, her breathing audible. When she stopped, her hands seemed to collapse on the keys. She turned slowly, her body stiff. How long? Said Rowan. Max glanced back at her monitor one last time before responding. A little over 2 hours. What? Rowan and Mel both shouted in unison. I told you, their ship, it's unbelievable. 2 hours, said Captain Sora, nodding to herself. She froze completely, and there was a moment of silence, but she overcame whatever it was. Okay, then. Captain Sora leapt down the 3 steps to Mel's station and grabbed the extended microphone next to her. She punched the intercom button. My sisters, this is your captain speaking. Emergency drill, effective immediately. Her voice echoed from the outer corridor. Everyone, gear up. She raced back up and went to the door, smacking the palm-sized button next to it. The thick steel slab swiveled open with a groan. You 3 stay here. She glared at them. Don't you dare tell anyone what we've seen. The door shut behind her as she rushed down the passageway. This is gross, said Nin. We didn't even get to shower. She and Eloise had left the gym and were jogging back up the main passageway towards the front of the Gaia, the head as they called it. The 300-yard-long spine they were in was often used for back-and-forth endurance runs. They were on their way to the barracks, as both girls were still barefoot and in their workout clothes, their supersuits as they'd named them, the vibrant colors incongruous with the industrial gray ship. I wouldn't mind just fighting like this, though. Eloise was smiling, her rainbow braids bouncing as she ran. We look like badass superheroes. Yeah, we look awesome. Nin puffed out her chest and made her strides more deliberate, fists clenched. I'd want my boots, though, and maybe those cool gloves Brune and Thandi work in. We're better off than C, though, said Eloise. She'd be fighting naked. Nin winced and began slowing down. Shoot. Eloise looked back and drew up to a stop as Nin settled into a walk. What? Should we let her out? Eloise shrugged. I don't know. She's supposed to be in confinement, isn't she? Yeah, but if this was a real attack, we'd let her out, right? Nin came to a stop and glanced back over her shoulder. We're supposed to treat these drills like they're real, aren't we? Yeah, I guess. Eloise considered a moment. Do you even know the passcode? Nin scoffed. Do I know the passcode? Eloise chuckled, then gave it some thought. She had been enjoying the run and was on board with anything that could extend it. She shrugged and smiled again. All right then, let's go. Nin mirrored her friend's smile, and the colorful pair took off back in the other direction. They are absolutely not ready, said Kamala. I expected to have another 7 years with them. Can't we try to outrun it? Not that ship, said Sora. She was dumping the rest of her moonshine down the sink in her cabin. It's faster than anything we could have imagined. What are pirates doing all the way out here? Out here is a relative term when you can go that fast. Wasn't Thandi working on a way to cloak us using the gravity well somehow? She's not going to finish that in 2 hours. 2 hours. Kamala leaned her lower back against the steel counter next to the sink. She folded her arms and shook her head incredulously. Outside, they could hear the bustle of girls preparing for their imaginary drill. I suppose we have no choice, then. Nope. Kamala watched as the uncharacteristically animated captain moved to the table and began rolling up her star maps. I'll need Eloise and Nin, immediately, said Kamala. She took a deep breath. And Zafira. Captain Sora paused and straightened her back. The morning's drama seemed so distant now. She winced. Ugh, right. Yeah, get everyone geared up and then have someone bring her a uniform. She's quite comfortable with. I've had enough streaking on my ship for one day. Kamala was about to respond when they heard a crackle. Mel's voice sounded from the comm panel on the wall. Ah, Captain? Sora set her maps down and walked to the panel. She pressed one of the buttons. What is it, Mel? Even through the small round screen, Sora could see how shaken she was. Max says that the pirates, are going to be here sooner now. Like, they know that we've spotted them. Okay, said Sora, tentatively. How soon? Mel closed her eyes a moment before opening them back up and speaking. 45 minutes. What? How? She says they changed their course after we scanned them. They sensed it somehow. They know we're getting ready for them. Kamala had startled at the news and was approaching the panel herself. She looked at Sora. Can we at least speed up? I need more time. Every minute helps. Sora nodded and hit the talk button again. Okay, she said. I need you and Rowan to give us as much speed as you possibly can. Anything to buy us more time. They watched as Mel nodded, dumbstruck. Yes, Captain. The screen flickered into static then blinked off. I'll start getting everyone ready, said Kamala. That fight was bullshit, Brune, said Layla. She sat on the nearby examination table, swinging her feet and eating an apple. The giantess sat on a low stool as Leah stood above her, applying stitches to the inside of her lower lip. In the bright cone of light from the overhead lamp, Brune's gray undergarments revealed all the bruises and cuts on her enormous stocky form. Her leg had begun to shake with impatience after the captain's announcement, but the twin medics had refused to let her leave the sick bay. Layla continued, I bet you Saphira has been sneaking into the showers at night, practicing her moves on a slippery floor. Brune shrugged and responded with some incoherent sound through a mouth full of fingers. The twins nodded in understanding. She has been, said Jojo's disembodied voice. Fuck. Layla nearly leapt off the table. Do not startle us when we're with a patient. Leah's voice was firm as she continued sewing. With her head tilted back and her mouth stretched open, Brune's wide eyes searched around for Jojo in the gloom outside of the light cone. Like most of the ship, the sick bay's walls and ceiling were covered in so many pipes, ventilation shafts, and cables that in some places, it seemed there was no wall or ceiling at all. You didn't flinch, dear Leah, said Jojo. Her sleek, sinewy form swung down in the darkness behind Leah, and she dropped to the floor. The entire move was completely soundless other than her voice. I knew you wouldn't. Jojo slinked up to Leah and rested her chin on the medic's shoulder, watching her work. You never flinch when you're working. Leah didn't respond. Her mouth remained a straight line, and she sighed through her nose. Only her twin noticed the subtle reddening of Leah's cheeks. Layla smirked, taking a loud munch from her apple. Everyone's cheeks reddened when Jojo was near. The contortionist suddenly snapped up straight and began to pace around them. "Why aren't you three getting ready?" "We're a little busy," said Leah. Jojo looked at Layla, who shrugged. "They can't expect much from us anyway," she said, "unless someone sprains their ankle or something." Jojo came to a stop and looked up. They could hear the pounding of footsteps on the floor above them. "Well, you three may want to finish up down here, nevertheless. There's something odd about this drill." "What do you mean?" said Leah. "Only that our noble captain appears to have woken up from a 10-year sleepwalk." Jojo stepped back out of the light and began walking away. "Something is amiss, lovelies." Brune mumbled something incoherent and began to rise. Wait. Let me just clip off the end." Leah grabbed the suture scissors from the nearby tray and brought them to Brune's mouth. Easy, there." The medic skipped back as Brune raced out of the sickbay, her heavy footsteps echoing up the iron stairs. Leah looked around and saw that Jojo had also disappeared, leaving the twins alone. She began to quickly put her tools away. "Come on, let's go." "Oh, whatever." Layla flung her apple core into the waste bin Leah had just pedaled open. Leah shook her head and tossed some bloody gauze in after it. Layla went on, "Maybe the captain just finally got laid. Kamala did some kind of kung fu sex move on her or something." She snaked her hands through the air as she spoke. There was a crackle overhead, and once again the captain's voice echoed throughout the ship. "Daughters of Gaia, I have a very important announcement." Sora's announcement broke off in a fit of coughing. Max blew the dust off of the retractable microphone, then wiped it on her uniform before handing the rusty grated brick back to the captain. It hung from the ceiling of the bridge, just above the captain's command chair, and was designed to give the user the mobility to pace around while speaking. Sora hadn't known it existed until Max had pointed it out, and it clearly hadn't been used in quite some time. "Thank you," Sora rasped. She stood next to the chair, resting her hand on it for support as she hunched forward, clearing her throat. Max nodded and gave a half-smile before noticing something in her peripheral vision. She squinted and looked off to her left, to the workstation on the opposite side of the bridge from her own. A light was blinking on the communications panel. In her entire lifetime, Max had never seen anyone man that station. She wandered over in a daze as the captain recovered and straightened up again. Sora cleared her throat, then took a moment to prepare herself before pressing the button on the side of the mic with her thumb. She brought it up to her mouth and took a deep breath. "Ah, Captain," said Max, her voice stiff. "We're being hailed." Sora blinked and lowered the microphone. Rowan and Mel turned, their expressions frozen in shock. Max's voice was steady. "There's both an audio and a video channel, Captain. Would you like to, should we answer them?" Sora took a moment to process the new information. "Max, you have just been assigned the role of communications officer, in addition to all your previous roles." "Yes, both channels, please." Max looked over at Mel, then looked beyond her and nodded. It took Mel a moment to realize what Max wanted. The co-pilot turned, remembering the broad circular screen between her and Rowan's workstations. It was 24 inches in diameter and hadn't been used since the night she and Rowan had been caught watching movies on it. Mel reached up and flipped a pair of switches, then hesitated before a third. "Ah, Captain. Do you want them to see us too?" Sora took a deep breath. She straightened her uniform, puffed out her chest, and squared her shoulders, then thought better of it and relaxed, leaning against the back of her chair. "Yes, of course, Mel. Put them on." There was a crackle and hiss from a pair of speakers at the front of the bridge, and the screen awoke in a haze of static. About 10 seconds passed before the visual noise materialized into the face of a young woman. Her features were stern, icy, and lit in sharp contrasts of light and shadow for added severity. Straight silky blonde hair fell past her shoulders, framing her fine-featured face and topping it with bangs cut in a mathematically perfect line just above the brows. One of the thin brows lifted slightly as she apparently made out the Gaia's bridge crew. Mel knew from screwing around with Rowan that their own camera showed the entire bridge. She wondered if she should have focused the lens on just the captain. The woman on the screen spoke in a bored, dry tone. "This is the Black Vulture. We will soon be boarding your ship and taking everything valuable you own. If you put up no resistance, you will still be alive when we are finished. Black Vulture out." The pirate looked off screen and nodded, apparently finished. "Hey, wait." Rowan spoke up, waving her hands. The pirate glanced back. "What's your name?" The woman on the screen squinted, possibly noticing the frizzy-haired freckled face at the bottom of her own display for the first time. Rowan leaned back a little. "Your ship is piloted by children, I see," said the pirate. Rowan bristled, taken aback. She swiveled her chair to look at Sora and Max. "You know what?" She glanced back at the screen. "I'm pretty sure she's not even the captain. I mean, look at her." Rowan jerked her thumb at the woman. "She's like the friggin' boarding school headmistress or something, making sure her girls don't screw anyone on their trip abroad." There was some distant snickering from off-screen. "Her name's Finch," said a young male voice. Rowan snorted. "Of course it is." Finch's mouth tightened. Something caught her attention, and she looked to her left, then frowned and lowered her eyes as she walked off-screen, making room for a newcomer. The screen was dark a moment. Apparently, pirates liked keeping the lights low. Then someone new walked into frame. Rowan froze. Max gasped. "Whoa," said Mel. A fiercely youthful dark brown face filled the monitor, stunning the Earthlings with its feral beauty. Bright red geometric shapes were tattooed around a pair of intense black eyes. A graceful Cupid's bow of a mouth was set in an expression of disinterested power. It was all surrounded by neck-length ghostly white hair tumbling in waves and interwoven with fiery red and orange feathers, the entire look accentuated by twin braids hanging from her temples. "This is Captain Tiva," said the young woman. She then paused expectantly, her face set in stone. The silence was only broken by the static from the speakers. Sora cleared her throat. "This is Captain Sora." "Well, Captain Sora. Since you seem to have a tenuous command over your teenage subordinates, I'm going to take this moment to give you some valuable information." Her accent was unfamiliar, clipped but laconic, biting off the end of each word, but in no hurry to finish. "If any single member of your crew puts up even the slightest indication of resistance, I'm going to assume that it's under your orders and space every single one of you, except for that mouthy little cottonhead, who I'll keep for my own amusement." Rowan bit back a comeback. "She's the cottonhead." Mel thought she could vaguely hear the young male voice speak from off-screen again. "Whom?" "There's no need for that," said Captain Sora. "A wise decision," said the pirate captain. Sora took a deep breath and went on. "I mean, there's no need to assume anything. I'm going to tell you directly right now that every single member of my crew will be resisting. It will be under my orders, and," she waved a dismissive hand towards her pilot, "you can have her." "Hey!" Rowan squawked. The first hint of a personality appeared on Captain Tiva's face, as a corner of her mouth lifted and her eyes shone with amusement. Sora had a sudden impression of just how young the pirate captain truly was, perhaps only a few years older than her own crew. Tiva's intense gaze flicked downward slightly. "Please shave that thing off, Cotton. I won't have you shedding on my ship. Your head is literally—" Rowan's cry was interrupted by the transmission cutting off with a crackle. The screen was filled with static again. Max was trembling. Captain, I don't mean to question." "This is the only way," said Sora. "We need them to board with as much of their crew as possible. We don't stand a chance ship versus ship." She drew the broadcast microphone back up to her mouth again. Now, where was I? What the hell is going on out there? Zafira paced around her damp, stifling jail cell. There were no speakers in the drainage room, nor out in the showers either. She had just barely made out the captain's previous announcements coming from the dressing room beyond. To make matters worse, the whoosh of running water below her, and clamor of machinery all around her, muffled even the little she could hear. Stranded far off at the stern of the ship, she was also unaware of all the bustle happening up at the front, but she could sense that there was something unusual going on. Presently, Zafira heard the distant crackle of the public address system once again and rushed to the door. She curled her hand and placed the edge of it against the small glass porthole, then pressed her ear against her hand, listening intently. She could just barely make out the captain's voice echoing from the changing room. Daughters of Gaia, as some of you may have guessed, this is not really a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. I need you all battle ready immediately. We are currently being... At that moment, one of the pumps in the wastewater treatment room below began its low hammering. No. Zafira struck the door with the edge of her fist, then closed her eyes and brought her ear back to the porthole. She held her breath and strained to hear as much as she could. Then anything we could have imagined, with technology we can't as of yet. My sisters, you may think that you are unprepared for them at this stage, so soon, so suddenly, but know this, they are equally unprepared for us. Our mothers, grandmothers, great and beyond, carried us across the universe, studying and developing their own. The sound of rushing water being pumped towards the front of the ship began to rumble under her feet. Zafira gritted her teeth and pressed her forehead against the glass, hoping her thick skull could act as some manner of conduit, picking up any audio vibrations from outside. If I open my mouth, will my face become a speaker? She'd felt that. Zafira reeled back, blinking, shook her head, then brought it back into place. Upon us in 40 minutes. I repeat, 40 minutes. In that time I want you to... Zafira was about to punch the door again, when she realized it wasn't her predicament that had cut the sound off. The captain had simply stopped speaking. 20 minutes. I repeat, we now have 20 minutes to, what? The captain said the next part off mic, but could still be heard. How? How is that possible? Brace for impact. Next, rewind, 2. Earth had cool stuff.